Sorry for the jump scare, Gen Xers, but in honor of Holy Week, I want to talk about how this guy took a thing that Jesus never said and turned it into a reason to dehumanize and abuse queer people. Let's talk about the phrase, love the sinner, hate the sin. Welcome back to Yesterqueers. My name's Amanda, and I'm a public historian who talks about queer history on the internet. For those who don't know, this is James Dobson, and he's an evangelical Christian psychologist. We'll get back to him. Love the sinner, hate the sin does not appear anywhere in the Bible. It's what's called an aphorism, a short, pithy phrase that's meant to express a general truth. Other examples would be things like, a penny saved is a penny earned, or don't judge a book by its cover. As far as we can tell, the first appearance of a similar phrase is in St. Augustine's letter 211, which was written in approximately 424. It's a letter to a group of nuns in Hippo whose attempt to replace the Mother Superior has caused the monastery to descend into chaos. The first 4 paragraphs reprimand the nuns for allowing themselves to become disordered, and the rest detail rules by which the nuns must live their lives. Augustine covers everything from the appropriate way to launder clothes to how best to resolve conflict among the sisters. The Latin phrase that's most likely the origin of love the sinner, hate the sin, is cum delectione hominum et odio vidiorum, which roughly translated means with love for mankind but hatred for sin. It's part of a paragraph in which Augustine warns the nuns against making wanton eyes at men, which I guess was a big enough problem in Hippo in the 5th century that he felt the need to address it. He describes how a flirtatious nun should be disciplined and what should happen to that nun if she refuses discipline. If she refuses to submit to this and does not go away from you of her own accord, let her be expelled from your society. For this is not done cruelly but mercifully, to protect very many from perishing through infection of the plague with which one has been stricken. Moreover, what I have now said in regard to abstaining from wanton looks should be carefully observed, with due love for the persons and hatred of sin, in observing, forbidding, reporting, proving, and punishing of all other faults. Augustine intended the phrase to comfort the nuns in the face of this seeming paradox of the church, where people should be loved, but sin should be reported and punished. Elsewhere in the letter, Augustine refers to this as the balance between severity and charity. Saint Benedict wrote something similar about 100 years later in the chapter of his Holy Rule dedicated to choosing an abbot. Among other qualities, the abbot must hate fault, but love the brothers. Jump forward to the 18th century, and love the sinner, hate the sin seems to become established rhetoric, though it's applied to sinners broadly and not specifically to queer people. For example, in his 717 poem Eloisa to Abelard, Alexander Pope laments, "How shall I lose the sin, yet keep the sense? And love the offender, yet detest the offense? How the dear object from the crime remove, or how distinguish penitence from love?" In 1729, Isaac Watts, the British theologian who wrote Joy to the World and hundreds of other hymns, wrote in his Discourses of the Love of God, "When we behold the vices of men with holy aversion and hatred, and immediately transfer this hatred to their persons, whereas we ought to pity and pray for them, or when we see a fellow Christian fall into sin, and because we hate the sin, we hate the sinner too, we suffer our hatred to grow into disdain and irreconcilable enmity." Watts believed that hating the sin led to hating the person, which would subordinate a Christian soul to his own ego rather than to God. You may have heard that Gandhi wrote "Hate the Sin and Not the Sinner" in his 1929 autobiography, and he did, but unfortunately most people stop there when quoting him. The full quote reads, "Man and his deed are 2 distinct things. Whereas a good deed should call forth approbation and a wicked deed disapprobation, the doer of the deed, whether good or wicked, always deserves respect or pity, as the case may be. Hate the sin and not the sinner is a precept which, though easy enough to understand, is rarely practiced, and that is why the poison of hatred spreads in the world." James Dobson is one of the sources of that poison of hatred. He is the founder of not only the Family Research Council, but also Focus on the Family, an evangelical parachurch organization that has made anti-LGBTQIA+ activism a cornerstone of its pro-family mission since 1977. Dude isn't just a homophobe. He believes that queer people and feminism will literally destroy the world. He is one of the powerful evangelical voices who, starting in the 80s, took the phrase "love the sinner, hate the sin," which was at best an attempt to explain a Christian paradox, and turned it into a weapon that has been used against queer people ever since. You rarely hear this phrase applied to adulterers or murderers or gamblers or any other kind of sinner. It's now used almost exclusively against the LGBTQIA+ community. Focus on the Family claims to have moderated their views since Dobson left the organization in 2010, but I took a spin through their website, which was gross, and there's still an entire section dedicated to the spiritual war against homosexuality, so I wouldn't invite them to Pride just yet. That's it for today. As always, more information, including sources and further reading, is available in the usual place. For a deep dive into how homosexuality is described and understood in the Bible, I recommend you check out Dan McClellan, a biblical scholar who has done several videos on that topic.